Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Galadarsis video, where today I'm going to be using the Sunflora line. Now this line consists of Sunkern, which is the lowest base stat total Pokemon up until this point in the series, and Sunflora, a Sunstone evolution that will allow me to kind of pick and choose when I wanted to evolve it, though there is one major mistake in the video which will kind of go against that notion. But anyway, I think it's about time we move on to Sunkern, a Pokemon with 30 HP, 30 attack, 30 defense, 30 special attack, 30 special defense, and 30 speed, making it incredibly bad at everything. And then going over to its moves, Sunkern actually has a different level up learn set compared to Sunflora, and most importantly, it gets Synthesis at level 37, which I might just go for. It also gets access to Sunny Day and Solar Beam, which could be an interesting pairing to make Solar Beams happen on the turn that they're used. However, with the setup time, that might be harder to do, just because of how frail it is. And otherwise, I'm not sure what else to really use here. I mean, Double Edge is okay, and Light Screen could come in handy, but it really just has a very shallow move pool. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our Sunkern in particular, which has a lax nature, raising its defense but lowering its special defense. Definitely not the best nature it could have gotten, but maybe the defense could come in handy. It gets the Chlorophyll ability, doubling its speed and sunshine, which will be very handy for Sunny Day. And it gets Absorb and most importantly Growth by level 10. Anyway, the first thing we must look at is Chobin's Sunkern. Now, the reason I'm using Eevee in this fight is because you actually need to take Eevee to the Sailor and Guardian Port to actually get the Evolutionary Stone, so usually I wait until after this fight to actually get the Pokemon. Anyway, all that to say, Chobin has a Sunkern. And of course, with a Pokemon this weak, we need to do a little bit of extra training before I try to do anything. Now, while this trainer is a one-time fight if you actually win, it does come with a huge benefit of giving you one of the best gimmick TMs in the game. That, of course, being the TM for Attract, which is a 50% chance to make the opponent not attack you. And luckily, I ended up being female, which matches up perfectly into the lady here, who only has 2 male Pokemon. Now, the thing is that whole fight previously was just set up so that I could do this one. And that's because after defeating this lady, you get access to the Bullet Seed TM. And for Sunkern, especially at this level, that is going to be a huge damage increase, even if it comes at the cost of a bit of inconsistency with its damage. But this is definitely worthwhile considering I only have Absorb at this point. So after beating the old lady, I teach Bullet Seed right away. And with that, the leveling process has sped up quite a bit. Now at level 13, I get the move Mega Drain, which I'm going to teach over Absorb, of course, and then we go into the battle against the old man. Now this fight could go one of 2 ways. Either this is going to be extremely easy, or extremely difficult, and that's because the Abra has all 3 elemental punches, those being Fire, Electric, and Ice, and 2 of those 3 are super effective. Now, Electric isn't very effective, which is what I'd like to see, but unfortunately, first attempt doesn't go too well. Go back in again, Thunder Punch into Teddiursa. Honestly, if Teddiursa takes all the hits as well, that would be even better. So, Fire Punch into Teddiursa again, Mega Drain takes Abra down to a sliver. Water Gun really doesn't do that much damage to Sunkern, which is quite nice, and luckily the Abra does just take down the Teddiursa, so I'm able to take it down without taking any damage from it. Then out comes Shroomish, and unfortunately, even though I know Shroomish really isn't all that much of a threat, the fact that I do so little damage to other grass types at the moment means that I would rather use a whole bunch of growths. That way I guarantee I can take it down quickly. And it also allows me to take down Horsey in a single hit, getting me nearly up to full health. And now it's just the slow process of whittling down Shroomish, which even at plus 3 special attack, I'm still only doing a third. So it does take quite a few hits, but eventually we take down the Shroomish and we can finally move on. And today I decided to fight the Blue Power Ranger because I have super effective damage against him, and I don't think any of his Pokemon can take me down that easily. I take down the horsey in a single hit, which is very nice. Then out comes the Shadow Sfeel, and Sfeel has quite a bit of HP, so I'm hoping that any damage I take I can just heal off by using Mega Drain on it, but it actually does a substantial amount of damage with Shadow Wave, and Goldine's Peck finishes me off, so I decide to go back to Mount Battle to do a bit of extra training, and when I reach level 18, I get the move Ingrain, which will allow me to heal a 16th, I believe, of my total HP every turn, and I get rid of Bullet Seed. And then I run into another Sunkern. Hello, other Sunkern. Goodbye, other Sunkern. And then I move on to the battle against the Blue Power Rangers once again. Anyway, if you are enjoying this video, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Anyway, time for just a little bit of rambling, and I said at the beginning of this video that I made a mistake, and that's that I wanted to use Sunkern all the way up until I beat Naps, which at the time seemed reasonable because I had forgotten about a key detail, which I'll go into further in a bit, but the main thing right now is that I over-leveled quite a lot just to get to that point. So at level 25 I get Endeavor, and at level 30 I get Sunny Day, which I teach over Attract, and then when I finally get to Naps, I'm already at level 33. And despite that, Murkrow is still a huge threat to me because it's got Peck, and even the Rhyhorn is still doing decent damage to me. And I'm not actually able to finish this fight until I get to level 36 and 4 attempts later. What made this battle difficult was the fact that Murkrow is just doing a ton of damage and also took multiple Mega Drains to take down. And I hadn't yet realized that I could just take down the Rhyhorn, and then the Slakoth is easy to set up on because it only attacks every other turn. Anyway, the whole point of waiting until I defeated Naps was to get the item behind him, which just so happens to be a certain evolutionary stone, which, going into this, I had completely forgotten was the wrong stone. In my mind, I had thought it was the Sunstone all along, when it turns out to be the Leaf Stone, which is definitely not what I wanted, and the wave of dread that hits me as I open this chest, realizing that I had just wasted 3 hours of Sunkern's time getting to this point. Now, it's not a complete waste. I am level 36, which means that in one level I get the move Synthesis, which I might need anyway, but it still doesn't feel that great that I wasted all that time. But there's nothing I can really do about it, so we need to just move on. And I go ahead, after getting Synthesis, I give myself a Sunstone, and I evolve Sunkern into the majestic Sunflora. Hello, Sunflora. Now, I do think that Sunflora is going to be a very nice upgrade, and when it evolves, it also gets Petal Dance, which I decide not to learn, because it confuses you after 2 or 3 turns. But anyway, Sunflora has 75 HP, 75 attack, 55 defense, 105 special attack, 85 special defense, and 30 speed. So while it does have a very good special attack stat, a solid special defense stat, and okay HP and attack, its abysmal speed is definitely going to hold it back quite a lot. And its 55 base defense is making me fear for the Shadow Ends that it'll have to face in the late game. But for now, we go ahead and move on to our first boss battle, and that is against Lavrina. She leads with a Love-Disc and a Beautifly, and because 2 of her 4 Pokemon are 4 times resistant to Grass-type attacks, I am going to use quite a few growths to make sure that I can guarantee a one-shot, which is going to take quite a while. However, Sunflora really isn't at risk of fainting because I have Synthesis, which can always just heal off the damage I'm taking. Now, in hindsight, I do think I might have gone just a little overboard with the amount of growths I used, because honestly, neither of her 2 4 times resists are all that strong, so I don't think it would have mattered if I one-shot or not. However, this does give me a bit more consistency and a bit more safety, I think, overall, so I go for Mega Drain, taking Beautifly down in a single hit, and then out comes Roselia, which really only has Pin Missile to deal damage to me. So I go for Mega Drain, and surprisingly, it actually survives. Only on a sliver though, so I'm pretty sure there's a good chance it was just a range, though I am still shocked it survived the attack anyway. I set up Sunny Day once again because it just ran out, and Roselia, like I said, can't really do all that much damage to me, so I decided to take down Love Disc instead, and then out comes her final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Delcatty. Now, with how many growths I have set up, I know for a fact this goes down in a single hit, and then all that's left is the Roselia, which, after a futile Pin Missile, goes down to Mega Drain. So with that, we beat Laverne on the first attempt pretty easily, but that is no surprise because we are so low over-leveled. Anyway, you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video without the obligatory Mirror B, so how are you doing today, Mirror B? Unfortunately, this did take quite a while to get to you, but it's good to see you nonetheless. Anyway, at the Real Game Tower, I pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and while it doesn't get the move Reflect, it does get Light Screen, which I go ahead and pick up just in case I need that extra bit of special defense. At level 42, Sunflora gets Solar Beam, which is going to pair very nicely with Sunny Day, and then I go into the battle against Snattle. He leads with a Lantern and Quagsire, and I go ahead and set up Sunny Day on the first turn, that way I know I can outspeed everything even after taking a Rock Tomb. And then I go for Mega Drain, which obviously takes down the Quagsire because it is 4 times weak to grass. And now that the sun is set up, I know for a fact I can go for Solar Beam, and it should be able to take down just about every other Pokemon on his team. So Lunatone goes down, and then out comes Castform, which because of Sunny Day, it's going to turn into a Fire type, which means that it does resist Solar Beam, but I'm so much higher level that it takes it down a single hit anyway. And then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Metang. Solar Beam takes down Metang in a single hit, and then that just leaves Lantern, which even with the sunlight gone, Mega Drain should be strong enough to take it down in a single hit, which it does, and I beat Snattle on the first attempt. So moving on back over to Chobin, now riding the Robo-Groudon, and I run into another Sunflora. Hello, other Sunflora, and goodbye, other Sunflora. Now before the next battle, going up to Gonzap, I decided to teach Hidden Power, and that's because Sunflora actually got Hidden Power Ice, which could be very handy. So I go into the battle, and on the first turn the Nuzleaf is going to go for Fake Out. However, because I'm a grass type, the Electrode is just going to go for Sonic Boom, an 80% accurate move that does a flat 20 damage, so it is incredibly non-threatening. So while the Nuzleaf is stuck recharging after Hyper Beam, I decide to use this time to get a Synthesis off to heal to full. And now I can start my offensive. I go for Hidden Power into the Nuzleaf, taking it down in a single hit. He then sends out Vileplume, which normally would be a huge threat, but luckily that Hidden Power Ice should be good enough to take it down in a single hit, which it does. Then out comes Whiscash, which really isn't all that threatening. All it can really do is use Rock Tomb to lower my speed. However, all of his Pokemon are fairly slow other than the Electrode. Now, I decide to attack the Electrode this turn for basically no other reason than to do a little bit of damage, because on that turn Sunny Day was going to end, and I didn't want to face down his final Pokemon without having Sunny Day up. I use Synthesis to get back up to full. Whiscash uses Rock Tomb, but it doesn't really matter. And now I go for Solar Beam to take down the Whiscash, bringing out his final Pokemon, which is Skarmory. Now, I do have Hidden Power Ice to deal decent damage to it. However, it does have Aerial Ace, which could do a lot of damage back to me. And while it does do decent damage, it's actually not as strong as I thought it'd be, so I'm able to take it down. And then all that's left is the Electrode, which of course goes down to a single Hidden Power. And we move on from Gonzap straight into the battle against Corrigan. He leads with a Lairon and a Celio, and I go for Sunny Day on the first turn once again. Celio goes for Earthquake, dealing almost nothing. And then I use Solar Beam to take down the Celio, which goes down in a single hit. Then out comes his Slowking. Now, Lairon hits me with an Iron Tail, but is only 75% accurate, so it does have a fairly decent chance to miss. Go for Solar Beam once again, taking down Slowking, and then out comes his Ursaring. Now, between these two, Ursaring is definitely the bigger threat because it does have Slash, so I decide to take it down first. Then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Primeape. Iron Tail hits again, getting a crit and unfortunately a defense drop. However, Lairon's the only physical attacker left after Primeape goes down, so I think I'm still fine. Out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Hypno. Lairon gets a second defense drop, so I definitely need to take the Lairon down now, but I decide to go for Synthesis first, hoping that it doesn't hit again. Unfortunately it does, but it seems I'm staying about the same HP, so I just have to wait for an opportunity for it to miss. Unfortunately, Lairon just will not miss. And the issue with that is now that Sunny Day is gone, Solar Beam is going to take 2 turns to work, so I decide to set it up, hoping that I don't get taken down this turn, but unfortunately Lairon hits and finishes me off. So even though I'd say that battle was a bit unlucky, I do have a better way of doing this. So I set up Sunny Day, and instead of taking down the Celio this time, I'm going to take down Laron instead. See, Celio, it does have super effective damage with Aurora Beam, but the thing is it really doesn't do that much damage, and its secondary effect lowers attack, which really doesn't matter for Sunflora. So I take down both his Laron and Slowking, and then out comes Ursaring. Now it is going to protect this turn, so I go ahead and use Synthesis to get up to full health. And now I can continue. I take down the Ursaring in a single hit with Solar Beam, and then out comes his Shadow Primeape once again. But as we already know, it goes down in a single hit anyway. The only issue would be if the Sunlight faded this turn, which it does. But Primeape really isn't doing that much damage anyway. I set up another Sunny Day, and then I go ahead and continue Solar Beam to take down the Primeape. And then out comes his final Pokemon once again, that Shadow Hypno, which should also go down to a single Solar Beam as well, which it does, and then all that's left is Celio, which of course goes down to a single Solar Beam as well. And with that, we beat Gorgon, and we go ahead and move on to the last area of the game, where, of course, Sunflora isn't really doing all that great, but if it can get through these last few fights, it should still be okay. Anyway, we start with Lavrina. She leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorbis, and unfortunately, because I have to set up Sunny Day on the first turn, I do leave myself open to Infatuation, which does happen. I go for Solar Beam, luckily though, so I take down the Gardevoir, then out comes Roselia. Gorbis goes for Ice Beam, dealing a decent amount of damage. I go for another Solar Beam, taking out the Gorbis, and then she sends out her first Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Farfetch'd. And I decided to take down the Gorbis last turn, which does leave me open to getting attracted once again. However, I am able to get through it again and take down Roselia, and she sends out her final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Altaria. Luckily, the Shadow Panic misses from Farfetch, so I'm able to take it down with a Hidden Power Ice. And then all that's left is Altaria, which, being 4 times weak to Ice, should hopefully go down to a single hit as well. It does, and we beat Lavrina on the first attempt. Now, I decided to go back to the mainland and go ahead and pick up Double Edge and teach that over Hidden Power because of this fight right here. Now, my whole strategy through this entire game has been setting up Sunny Day so I can outspeed and deal a ton of damage with Solar Beam, but the thing is that these are 2 fire types, so their fire type moves get powered up in the sunlight, and on top of that, before I can set it up, I also have to take 2 attacks from these Pokemon as well, and in this battle, Ninetales decided to go for Confuse Ray, which is just very annoying to deal with. Now, Vileplume does 4 times resist my grass type moves, however, before I did have Hidden Power Ice, so I was able to get by it fairly easily. And even though Magmar doesn't do a ton of damage, I'm not able to take it down with a single Solar Beam, so it does make it just a little bit more of a threat because of that. And then, even once I'm done with that, his final Pokemon also resists grass type moves, and is probably the second scariest behind the Ninetales, and that is Pinsir. And that's because even though I do have a huge level advantage, its moves still do about a quarter of my health, which wouldn't be so bad if Pinsir was at the beginning of the fight. However, at this point, usually I have to set up the Sunny Day again, which in this fight I do, and so I'm actively at a disadvantage until I get it back up, so I have to use Synthesis until I get favorable luck or am in a better position. And I don't think it goes down to a single Solar Beam either, so I did get very lucky on that crit, so I'm able to get by with half HP to take down the Vileplume, which allows me a little bit of wiggle room to use Synthesis. That battle took 5 attempts. Anyway, I now run into another Sunflora. Hello, other Sunflora. Goodbye, other Sunflora. And I get to the top of the volcano, where I run into the battle against Snaddle. He leads with a Matang and a Quagsire. I set up Sunny Day as always. And Quagsire is going for Body Slam, which is probably the worst move it could use because it's always got that 10% chance to paralyze, and if that happens, it does ruin an attempt more likely than not. Anyway, out comes Scizor, and I go for Solar Beam into it, and luckily it is doing half, despite it being 4 times resisted, so I can finish it off on the following turn. And after it goes down, he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, which is Solrock. Now, Solrock really isn't all that threatening, I don't think. So I go for Synthesis on this turn. It is going to set up Shadow Sky, but I can always get past that later. And of course the Matang phrases me. Oh, that's so unfortunate. Shadow Rave really isn't doing that much, and neither is Ice Punch. But this still could lead to a loss if I get some terrible luck. Luckily I didn't. I defrost fairly quickly, and I'm able to set up Sunny Day. And I decided to go ahead and use this turn to take down Solrock because I really don't want the Shadow Sky up once again. He then sends out his cast form, which turns into the fire cast form because of Sunny Day, and I go for Solar Beam into it, which still takes it down in a single hit, and then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Starmie. Now, with Sunny Day up, I do think I outspeed. I do, and I'm able to take down Starmie in a single hit, and all that's left is the Metang, which, as long as it doesn't freeze, I should be able to take down in a single hit as well, and we beat Snaddle on the first attempt. Now moving on to Ardos, he leads with a Shadow Swallow and Alakazam, and both of his leads are very fast, so they're able to outspeed me before I set up Sunny Day, and unfortunately, I am at the risk of being frozen by Alakazam's Ice Punch, which happens in this attempt. And even though I got some terrible luck on this one, I do think that this battle is going to be very difficult. Both of his leads are very fast, and in fact, he's got a couple other Pokemon that are quite quick as well, so I will need Sunny Day in order to get past them. And on the following attempt, I'm able to get lucky enough to get Sunny Day up and go for Solar Beam to take down Swallow right away. Then out comes Kingdra. Alakazam uses Fire Punch this time because Sunny Day is active, raising that damage. I decide to go for Double Edge, taking it down in a single turn, luckily, and then out comes Heracross, which resists my Grass-type moves and is fairly defensive, so I don't think Double Edge is going to take it down either. Kingdra is using Ice-type damage, dealing quite a bit to me. And unfortunately, this is just a bit of a brick wall here that I can't really get past at this level. Mega Horn nearly does 3/4 of my health, and unfortunately with Sunny Day going out that turn, I need to set it up again, and I lose. So after 8 attempts, I decide to go ahead and do a bit of training at Mount Battle, because I couldn't see a way of getting past them without some incredible luck. So after doing a bit of training, I now return at level 76, where I've decided to change my strategy up just a little bit. I decided to go for Double Edge into Alakazam on the first turn. That way it's not going to be freezing me or burning me. And on top of that, if Swallow works nicely with me, it'll be using Shadow Half every other turn. So I'll be able to take down threats that I couldn't take down before. And with the sunlight being strong, I can heal up to full. Kingdra is going for Ice Beam, luckily no freezes. I go for Solar Beam into it, taking it down, and then out comes Heracross, and this is where I just need a bit of luck. Swallow sets up Shadow Sky because I had Sunny Day active, so I go ahead and use Sunny Day, and luckily Swallow does go for Shadow Half, taking Heracross down to half. Now Heracross was probably the biggest threat in this battle, simply because I couldn't take it down with Solar Beam or Double Edge in a single turn. And now with that at half health, I can finish it off. Then out comes Electabuzz, and with the sun still up, I can outspeed the Swallow, and I got hit by Rock Tomb. Unfortunately, I was just a little too slow. So now 7 attempts later, and now attempt number 15 overall, Swallow has decided to start using Shadow Half on the first turn, which isn't great because Alakazam was already a Pokemon I could take down in a single hit anyway. So having its HP half doesn't really matter, however it does save me a little bit of recoil damage. I go for Synthesis, Swallow sets up Shadow Sky, which is a bit unfortunate. Hopefully it goes for Shadow Half this turn as well, though I don't think it's necessary because Kingdra does go down in a single hit, but it does go for it. So I'm able to set up Sunny Day, and Ice Beam still is doing quite a bit of damage despite my level advantage. Go for Synthesis to get back up to full. Another Ice Beam with no freeze. And then I go for Solar Beam to take down the Kingdra, then out comes Heracross. And Swallow can either use Shadow Sky or Shadow Half at this point. Luckily it decides to go for Shadow Half again, so I'm able to take down Heracross now. And with it not having used a Rock Tomb this time, I know I can outspeed both of them and take down the Electabuzz in a single turn, which it goes down, and then all that's left is Shadow Snorlax. Now, Shadow Snorlax is still a huge threat because I only have a 55 base defense, but I'm hoping it just misses. It doesn't, takes me down to 40. So, surprisingly, I survived that fairly well. I go for Synthesis to get back up to full, and with the Shadow Mists, the Snorlax will always hit Shadow End, but because it's only doing about a third of my health, I go ahead and let it do it so I can get it down to a low enough HP to go down to Solar Beam, and then all that's left is the Shadow Swallow, which goes down to a Solar Beam, and we finally beat Ardos. Now moving on to Gorgon, he leads with Slowking and an Ursaring, and I go for Sunny Day as always. Slowking hits a very weak Earthquake, and I go for Solar Beam to take down the Slowking. And once it goes down, he sends out Aggron, which between these two, at this point, I do think that Aggron is the bigger threat, because it still has Iron Tail, but it's also fully evolved now, so it does have a fairly good attack stat. Then out comes Walrein, which being part water type means that it will go down to Solar Beam as well. And then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Poliwrath. And it is also a water type, so it too goes down to Solar Beam in a single hit. And then out comes Mr. Mime. This is probably about the only thing on his team that might be able to survive a Solar Beam, because it has a decent special defense stat, but once it goes down Double Edge, all that's left is the Ursaring. And I decided to go for Synthesis here, and that's because I don't really want to set up another Sunny Day. I could just go for Double Edge, which actually takes it down in a single hit as well. Anyway, with Gorgon defeated, we move on to Eldis. He leads with a Ninjask and a Manectric, and I have to set up Sunny Day on the first turn. Luckily, Manectric does outspeed me, so I'm able to set up Sunny Day after it sets up Shadow Sky, and so I'm able to finish it off on the following turn with Solar Beam. And after Shadow Manectric goes down, he then sends out his strongest Pokemon, which is a Shadow Salamence. Now, after I get rid of Salamence, all of his other Pokemon really won't be all that difficult. I just need to get past this wall, and unfortunately it does 4 times resist my Grass-type moves. So I am going to have to play this a bit slower, go for Synthesis to get nearly back up to full. And I can't really start attacking until Ninjask runs out of Silver Winds, which this is his last one. And now it's going to be using Protect every other turn, which means that it's not nearly as threatening as it once was. I decided to go for Double Edge even though my attack is lowered, which still does an incredible amount of damage. An Aerial Ace comes out, taking me down to 57, and I survive on 2 HP, go for Synthesis to get back up to half. And because I need to set up Sunny Day again, I decide to go for another Synthesis, nearly getting me to full HP, and I'm glad I did because these two attacking take me well below half. I get up Sunny Day, and I go for Solar Beam to finish off the Salamence, and then out comes this next Pokemon, which is a Flygon. Luckily, it is neutral to Grass, so I should be able to take it down in a single hit, which it does go down, and then out comes his Shadow Marowak, and luckily, I know for a fact I can take it down in a single hit with Solar Beam as well. And once it goes down, he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Lapras, which might be able to survive a Solar Beam. I'm not exactly sure. It is very tanky. It doesn't, it goes down in a single hit, and then all that's left is Ninjask, which is going to protect this turn, so I decide to go for Synthesis, which also makes it so if it got a critical hit, it doesn't take me down. But anyway, we beat Eldis on the first attempt. Now moving on to the big box legendary, Shadowlugia, and I go for Double Edge, which is doing just under half, which isn't great. I decided to set up Sunny Day. Maybe the Solar Beam would be doing more damage, which it really isn't. Shadow Blast takes me down to 51. I go for Synthesis to get nearly to full, and unfortunately I am going to go into the Greevil fight with about a quarter of my health gone, but we beat Shadowlugia, and let's go ahead and see just how well we do for a first attempt. I go for Double Edge into Moltres to see how much I'm going to be doing, and it is not quite a one-shot, and unfortunately I am outsped by the Moltres as well, and Rhydon takes me down. Okay, well let's go ahead and try that again. Maybe it was just a fluke. And my luck is not the greatest today because I get burnt immediately, which eventually leads to another loss. Now, I decided to do things a little drastically. I decided to get rid of Sunny Day for Substitute, which I will find out in just a moment was a huge mistake. And then I go ahead and teach Growth over Double Edge, and then I go into the battle again, where almost immediately I realize that I've made a mistake because my whole plan is using Solar Beam, and now I don't have a way to use it every single turn. So after resetting back to my previous save, I go ahead and only teach Growth, and the reason I'm using Growth is because I really want that extra special attack, which will hopefully allow me to take down the legendary birds in a single hit. Now, there is one problem with that, and that's Moltres, which is 4 times resistant to my Grass-type moves. The other 2 birds I can probably get by just fine, but I was hoping that just adding a couple extra special attack boosts would allow me to get past everything with very little issue. Now, the thing is that this was actually my best attempt with the Growth strategy, and the reason that it doesn't work amazingly is because it is super reliant on the weather condition. And many of his Pokemon can set up Shadow Sky. Tauros is notorious for always doing it on the first turn unless it sees a KO, but Articuno and Zapdos can also set up Shadow Sky if certain conditions are met. I'm not exactly sure what those are, but they do it occasionally. And unfortunately, because I have to take down Tauros, I need to leave Moltres alive, which means that I have to take on 2 legendary birds at the same time. And because my health was going so low in this attempt, I decided to use Synthesis, which allowed Taurus to set up Shadow Sky, and now it's setting up Shadow Hold. And so I have to set up the weather, which I forgot to do, and unfortunately, I lost. So what I decided to do was revert back to before I had taught Growth, and instead just use Double Edge, because at level 93 I'm able to naturally outspeed Moltres and take it down in a single hit, though it is a bit of a range. And really that's been the biggest struggle of this entire fight, has been how to deal with Moltres, which Double Edge is just the best thing to take it down with. Now with Rhydon going down and already having Sunny Day up, I know I can outspeed the Tauros and take it down in a single hit, and instead of having a Moltres which always hits its attacks and has a 10% chance to burn me, instead I'm fighting Executor, which is going to miss 40% of the time. Another Solar Beam doesn't quite take down Articuno, though it is very specially defensive, so that's unsurprising. So I go for a second one to finish it off, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Zapdos. Another Executor miss on Shadow End. I go for another Sunny Day because it just ran out. Shadow Bolt gets a crit, taking me down very low. Luckily, Executor misses again. Synthesis brings me back to full. Shadow End finally hits, taking it down to half health. And Shadow Bolt doesn't get a crit this time. Go for Solar Beam, which also doesn't quite get the KO on Zapdos either. So maybe Growth could have been nice there, but a second Solar Beam finishes it off, and then all that's left is Executor. Now while I do think I could probably finish it off with Double Edge in a single turn, I decided to go for Synthesis just in case it decides to hit me and lower its health further. And with that, we finally beat Greevil on attempt number 17. So with that, how well did Sunflora do? It beat the game at a time of 18 hours, 57 minutes, and 8 seconds at level 93. And it lost 53 times throughout the game, 31 of those to bosses and 22 of those to random trainers. Now, on one hand, this is a very messy run because I had wasted a lot of time in the early game where I really didn't need to. In fact, I could have evolved to Sunflora right off the bat, more or less, probably given Sunkern a couple fights, and I would have had Razor Leaf very early on. On the other hand, Synthesis is an incredibly powerful move for this Pokemon, and had I not had it, I'm not sure if Sunflora could have done it. So I'm not sure if I really did this line justice by not evolving it for so long, or if I did the correct thing by not evolving it for so long. But hindsight is 2020, there's nothing I can really do about that now. So unfortunately, Sunflora finds itself at the bottom of the D tier, behind fellow grass type Tangela. Now, I don't want to sound all negative because I think that Sunflora is actually fairly decent through a good few parts of the game. That being mostly the mid-game between Snaddle and Greevil, because even though I like to say that grass is the worst type in the game, that usually comes from the fact that the beginning of the game is usually quite difficult for them, and the very end of the game is very difficult for them. But the mid-game can be quite alright. On top of that, Sunflora does actually have some pretty decent stats. 105 special attack is really good, and its HP, attack, and special defense are all solid as well. It really just is that low defense that can be kind of difficult to work around, and it's incredibly low speed, making it reliant on its chlorophyll ability, which means that I always have to set up the sunlight. But anyway, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!